So, what's actually going on here? This means that Firebrand, Renegade, and Scourge are popping up a lot. What does that tell you? Well, it tells you that these are probably really effective and generate you a high win rate. That's a good deduction that you can make from this statement. Now, the issue is that I've seen a lot of people going the other way and assuming that everything that doesn't see play very often is extremely bad. This is a very, very, very bad assumption. In fact, this is not the case. It is time for me to try and redeem myself because, gamers, I have made a mistake. I have made a terrible, terrible mistake, and I must now fix it. A few days ago, I'm going to confess, I tweeted out this image from Guild Wars 2 wingman.de. It's a good website, very good, in fact, with some very useful information on it. As a result of this, a few people have been looking at this stuff and leaving some comments on it, which are slightly disturbing me because the data has been misinterpreted big time. So, what are we looking at here? This is basically from a load of logs. You can see it's like 1.5 million logs, 160,000 logs have been added up and divided here. Oh, those are the number of players. Oh, that's a lot. 160,000 players, even better. I like that. 160,000 players. That is a huge amount, okay, of players. How often certain professions pop up. And you can draw some conclusions from this, but the problem is that you can't go the other way around. And the fractal one is actually really, really telling, by the way, right? Very, very telling indeed. So, what's actually going on here? This means that Firebrand, Renegade, and Scourge are popping up a lot. What does that tell you? Well, it tells you that these are probably really effective and generate you a high win rate. Now, that is good. Okay, that's a good deduction that you can make from this statement. Now, the issue is that I've seen a lot of people going the other way and assuming that everything that doesn't see play very often is extremely bad. This is a very, very, very bad assumption. In fact, this is not the case, right? For example, if you actually look at the really fast kills, you'll see Condi Daredevil popping up a lot, right? Specifically in regular tier 4 fractals and challenge modes that aren't Eye Keeper of the Peak, you are going to see power builds popping up a lot, right? Dragon Hunter, Soul Beast, even Weaver actually, right, are going to be popping up a lot more. But why don't you see them here? Well, it's because they're a lot harder to pull off. They require much more coordination to play a power-based composition. And Scourge, Renegade, and Firebrand typically generate very, very high win rates, which is what people are optimizing. Okay, are optimizing for here. And that was basically the short of it. I don't even need to say a lot more, actually. The other thing here is with raids, too. Again, people looked at this one, this is the one for raids, basically. Like the same thing, but with raids. And you can see here that, again, there are a few things that aren't very well represented. But again, that does not mean that they are bad at all. In fact, a lot of the time, it's even the opposite, right? Take a look here. Like for raids, Scrapper, for example, is very unpopular. Tempest doesn't even have its little icon rendering. These are two incredibly strong builds that people just randomly don't play them. Same thing with Soul Beast, right? Soul Beast is actually an excellent build for new players, but people simply do not play it because it isn't popular. And I really want to push back against this idea that something being unpopular means it's bad, right? Or something being unpopular means that it isn't viable or shouldn't be played. This is not not true, and it is not a good way to interpret data. Again, to underline it, you can look at something being popular and go, oh yeah, that's probably pretty good, but you cannot say something is unpopular. That means it isn't very good. There might be a correlation between these two things, and a really good example is Weaver. Weaver actually is underpowered right now. It's not bad, right? But specifically in raids, it actually performs pretty well in fractals, but specifically in raids, it is honestly a little underpowered. For the amount of utility it delivers, its damage is not good. So you can actually look at this, and that is true in that instance, but it will not always be true whatsoever, right? And just be very, very careful with how you interpret this information, because there is no guarantee whatsoever that that's the case. And you should not be looking at this as like, oh, everything is completely out of whack. It is in fractals, but not in raids. And that was the other really important thing that I wanted to mention actually here as well, guys. This graph here on the left massively affects the raid graph, because people getting into PvE probably do fractals and even challenge mode fractals before they approach raids. So in other words, people already have Scourge, Renegade, and Firebrand geared, so they're naturally going to play it a lot more, right? When you kind of go into raids as well, right? And you can really see that. You can see that as Scourge kind of got incredibly popular in fractals, the same thing happened. Now, to be fair, it was because Scourge got buffed pretty heavily and made it ridiculously overpowered. But a really big reason is that these metas are inherently linked. There is a reason why Heal Firebrand is so popular in raids, even though it's honestly not the best build. It's pretty good, but it's not like... It's not as good as, say, Heal Tempest, right? Heal Tempest is better, but far less popular than Heal Firebrand. And a big part of that is because people play Heal Firebrand in fractals, making it a lot easier. In that regard. So be aware of this. In fact, I really think that ArenaNet need to look at the fractal meta, because the fractal meta actually is really imbalanced, funnily enough, guys. I think the raid meta is surprisingly good. In fact, there was a recent speedrun by a top NA guild called Downstate Cucks, and during a full clear, they actually used every single elite specialization in their run. And that's actually serious. You can go and watch it. It was on Isa's channel, and you can watch that run. They used every single elite spec in the game. Right? Even Weaver. Now, it is quite funny. Weaver was actually only used exclusively on Eater of Souls, and Tempest was only used on the Escort event. So Ellie was kind of used in trash events, not for actual boss skills, which is unfortunate. But everything else was used on a boss skill. Scourge was used on a boss kill. Actually, I think maybe Hollow wasn't actually. Hollow was used on Escort, but I don't think it was used anywhere else. Yeah, because in general, it's not super popular right now for like the ultra speedrun stuff. You typically see it replaced by stuff like Renegades and Firebrands and so on. But everything else was actually used at the highest possible level. Yeah, Spellbreaker was used as a handkiter on Demos while also giving banners. Right, the ultimate slave, handkite slave, and banner slave. So yeah. Everything was used. So the raid meta is actually extremely diverse. It's simply that people don't play stuff. People should play Scrapper more. People should play Tempest more. Even Thief. I was actually surprised how popular Thief is actually. But Thief is really good. Like it actually is a really great DPS class to start out on, because it has loads of good utility with the stolen skills, does good damage, and is relatively easy to play as well. It's actually a really good call if you are a new friend. And of course, it's very good in high level play at the same time. But I just want to make sure that no one falls into this trap of assuming that because something doesn't get played, that means it's bad. I actually want to kind of give a bit of a callback here as well. If you actually recall all the way back in the day when Scourge did around 29k DPS, and one of the reasons why I was actually prompted to make this video was actually because of a YouTube comment that I saw on one of my videos. One guy said, you wouldn't have been so confident doing this run when Scourge was doing a pathetic 29k DPS. I obviously immediately replied saying that yes, I would be, right? Because again, Scourge has always been insanely strong actually. Even when it only did 29,000 DPS, I would make the argument that it was overpowered, not underpowered, simply because of how much it created its win rate. And again, Scourge was never played. People said, oh yeah, Scourge is awful, Scourge is unplayable, it's terrible, so bad, you get insta-kicked from groups, and you did get kicked from groups, but again, that was just misinformation, right? Like, Guild Wars 2, the PvE meta is so full of misinformation that it's actually insane. I was trying to come up with some kind of analogy there, but I'm too smooth-brained to do it. The amount of bad information that I see posted on forums, the Reddit, in-game, in Twitch chat, right? It is horrific, and it's a genuine massive problem for the game. Like, if players don't know if they can trust information, or if information is not reliable for new players, that is catastrophic for growing the hardcore PvE scene in general, raids, strike missions, fractals, all that kind of stuff. And right now we've got a problem. We've got a big problem with misinformation going down there right now. And it is actually worse in PvE, by the way. In PvP and World versus World, most people are genuinely pretty well informed about the way the meta goes. There's a little bit of salt about class balance, to be honest, but it's nowhere near as bad as PvE. And I think the meta is fairly well understood in World versus World. This is actually a PvE problem, 100%. Very, people are very misinformed when it comes to class balance. and so on, right? Yeah. That's all I got to say, really. That is all I have got to say on this particular topic. So that's it. If you have any questions, let me know, obviously. But the real key here is be careful when you interpret data. Like, be really, really careful, because it might seem intuitive that something would be implied, and in some cases there can be a correlation, but that does not mean that it will always be true, right? Again, Scrapper is, in my opinion, the perfect example in the raid scene. This build, and Tempest too, actually. These two builds are very unpopular, as you can see here. It's actually around 2% of, the players who play raids. That is obviously very, very low. It's a lot lower than you'd expect. With 18 elite specializations, each one, assuming it's balanced, would have approximately 5%, 5.5% of all players. It being at 2% is absolutely insane. This build is unbelievably powerful, and I'm talking specifically about power DPS quickness scrapper. It has a great revival kit. It's totally unkillable, does loads of damage, and gives super student quickness. What's not to love? It competes with the Firebrand spot, but in a way, it actually provides a lot of things kind of that aren't the same as Firebrand, but are different, right? You can revive, you can give super speed, and you're also really, really unkillable. You've got some pretty neat utility in there, to be honest. Like, having mortar kit in there is also really nice. It's actually a very strong build. I think a lot of people would probably get more value out of it than Firebrand a lot of the time. Same thing with Tempest. Tempest is an amazing healer. It really is. Druid is very, very dominant, but because people overvalue offensive buffs so much, like spirits, they think that Tempest is incredibly bad. In reality, Tempest is probably a DPS increase for most groups, simply because it will make them die less, right? And they'll have more uptime on their damage and better boon output than a Druid would. You can even run both, right? You can run like a heal Tempest and a Druid. That's perfectly okay. Nothing wrong with doing that. I'm not saying, by the way, that Scourge, Renegade, and Firebrand aren't insanely overpowered. They actually are. They are insanely overpowered. This is really important to understand. They are really, really overpowered. But it doesn't mean that everything else is bad, right? Are a lot of things quite bad compared to Scourge, Renegade, and Firebrand? Actually, yes. But is it that extreme? No. No, it absolutely isn't. And it's not a reason not to play a build. You will not get kicked for playing builds like this. In Fractals, it is very rigid, and I think Fractals really need to be looked at balance-wise. But in raids, it's a lot more flexible, and you can get away with a lot more. But to be clear, Firebrand, Renegade, and Scourge absolutely need the chop, right? They really, really do. ArenaNet, get on that right now. It gets a little bit more difficult with the same profession, because you can see that you can see by the way the graphs move here, that people tend to play whatever elite spec is best. People are willing to move spec way more than they're willing to move profession, right? You can see how all the Tempest swap to Weaver here, right? Like that. And you can see how Scourge is kind of cannibalizing Reaper a lot in that respect as well. And you kind of see this here in Dragon Hunter, right? When Firebrand really started becoming incredibly strong, you can see that a lot of the Guardian mains didn't stop playing Guardian. They just changed their elite specialization, right? So Dragon Hunter fused into Firebrand in this way too, right? Same thing with kind of like Base Warrior here too, in that regard as well. But honestly, I could go on for hours about this, right? And I'm kind of, I'm going dangerously tangential here, I'm afraid. But that is the key issue here. It is, in my opinion, a really big stumbling block right now for the endgame community in Guild Wars 2. People are flat out misinformed, right, about this stuff. And unfortunately, it propagates and goes all over the place, right? Like, it is very, very tough indeed. But enjoy your Firebrands, enjoy your Scourge. Okay, and get out there.